It's good to be with you today. I get asked on a regular basis, boy, why aren't you running this year? I ask myself that now and then too. But I did that once. You may not have known that. I'm asked, why did you lose? And I do remember the famous line by Fritz Mondale after he had the misfortune of running against Ronald Reagan. He said, you know, all my life I've wanted to run for president in the worst way, and that's just what I did. I learned from my experience a greater degree of optimism about the future for the country. We are a great people, and we have characteristics which will allow America, in my view, to lead the world this century and perhaps beyond. And I say that in particular now because we're going through a dramatic change in the nature of competition and enterprise in the world. And that change is associated with innovation. We've been innovating on a, if you will, a linear basis over the last 100 years, and now we're shifting into an exponential basis of change and innovation. And that because of the ability to categorize and collect enormous amounts of data, to process it in devices in our hands and will ultimately be injected in our bloodstream to look at our health and so forth. Our cars will not be driven by humans, they'll be driven by machines. The world is going to change in extraordinary ways that are hard to predict. In an environment like that, a nation which is an innovative nation should win. And that's exactly what we are. No nation is as competitive as we are in creating new enterprises, new businesses, new technologies. And I don't know why that is. I think part of it is just in our DNA. The great majority of our ancestors that have come to this country have come here for opportunity. Of the 25 largest market cap high-tech companies in America, 60% of them were started by first or second generation immigrants. It's in our DNA and our culture. Our legal system encourages innovation. Our bankruptcy laws, for instance, allow people to take risk without becoming personally devastated if the risk doesn't pay out. Our government has not placed a heavy hand over the years on picking winners and losers, and that's allowed people to have the freedom to innovate and to create change. Our educational system creates not only research centers, but students with great skill and capacity. And our financial structure. We have all sorts of capital. We have venture capital and LBO capital, and we have mezzanine debt and senior debt. We provide all sorts of financing to people and companies that have ideas. And so in my view, this century will remain an American century. The only thing that could mess that up is that if government can't deal with the inevitable challenges that any great society confronts. We've had challenges in our past, and we've ultimately overcome them one after the other. And right now, we've got a whole stack of challenges, and incredibly, our federal government seems incapable of dealing with the major challenges that the country faces. And if you think for a moment, what do you think are the biggest challenges that America confronts? And I've asked a number of people this and put a little poll together and written them down and then looked at them one by one. And let's just go through them. As a good Republican, I'll start with debt. The debt held by the public right now, the governmental debt held by the public is about 70-80% of the GDP. It's forecast over the next few decades to get to 200% of the GDP. And you know why. That's, of course, an unsustainable level. The reason, of course, is because the non-discretionary items in federal spending, which represents 2/3 of federal spending, entitlements primarily and interest, those continue to grow at a rate which far outstrips the rate of growth of our economy. And yet there is virtually no effort that's been undertaken, at least in the last 8 years or so, on either side of the aisle to find a way to stop the creep of the growth of these non-discretionary programs. There's been no proposal that's made any progress at all with regards to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We know how to solve those problems. There just isn't the will in Washington to deal with them. Let's take another issue, poverty. Look, when I was a young man, 1965, graduated from high school, LBJ declared the war on poverty. We've spent trillions of dollars to fight poverty, and we have record numbers of poor people in America today. Percentage of people living in poverty is the same as it was back in the 1960s, around just a little under 15%. Let's take another challenge that we face, and that is tougher competition in the education world for young people around the world. In 1970, the cost of educating a child K through 12 in today's dollars was $57,000, K through 12. Today it's $164,000. So we've tripled the amount per student we spend for a child going to school. We've doubled the number of educators, doubled the number of people who work per student, and how the kid's done. Test scores in English, math, and science haven't moved at all. We know how to fix K through 12 education. There just doesn't seem to be the kind of will to actually do what's necessary to fix it. Income inequality. Income inequality hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. And yet no proposals that would suggest how we could really attack the roots of the fact that people in the middle incomes and the lower incomes in America aren't seeing the progress they expect and need. Our lead militarily, another challenge. We're facing a much more assertive China. We're facing a adventuresome Russia, someone like Peter Zeihan, who wrote the book, what's it called, Accidental Superpower. He said, look, Russia will collapse in 8 years. Russia will collapse in 8 years, he writes, unless Russia takes over population and territory from some of their former satellites. And that's what they've been doing. Other challenges, of course, ISIS and the threat of radical jihadism around the world. So massive challenges, and yet despite all that, we continue to shrink our military footprint and capacity. Another challenge that is not being met. I'll mention one more, and that is the ability of America to compete. American competitiveness. Have we made it more attractive to compete in America or less attractive? I think you know the answer to that. When you hear about companies doing something called inversions, that suggests that people are deciding it's better to be outside America than inside America. And when politicians are saying, oh, we've got to make it illegal for them to do that, or tax them when they do that, we got to stop them from leaving. It's like, guys, if they're leaving, don't try and keep them from leaving. Instead, figure out how to make them want to stay. Make it more attractive to be here in this country. In our tax environment, our regulatory environment, our legal environment, all these things are making it harder for enterprises to stay and to want to come here and to grow and to thrive. You know, I've watched the presidential debates and looked at the give and take. There's been almost no discussion of those things I've just described. The national debt and how to deal with it and reforming entitlements. I don't think either candidate for president has said they're going to reform entitlements in one way or the other. Dealing with poverty, dealing with the roots of poverty. We know, by the way, how to eliminate intergenerational poverty, but we don't. We know what it takes to fix education, but we don't.